At a Friday press conference, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith officially put the Northern Gateway pipeline back on the table. Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau canceled Enbridge's Trouble project a decade ago, and if you live in British Columbia, there were plenty of reasons to support his decision. For example, a federal court of appeal cancellation of the approval permit because of shoddy consultation with First Nations, concern about running a pipeline through the Great Bear Rainforest sensitive ecosystem, the Liberals' explicit election campaign promise to keep oil tankers away from the northwest BC coast. Alberta saw the cancellation quite differently. To the United Conservative government, it was just more evidence that Trudeau and the Liberals were trying to kill the oil and gas industry because of climate change ideology. Northern Gateway has been a persistent Alberta grievance, and now Premier Smith is trying to revive it.
I know that the federal government is seeking input on projects that might qualify for a fast-track process. And so that's what I'll be looking at as an indicator of whether the federal government is going to meet us partway. Because the project I've put on the table is a revival of the Northern Gateway pipeline to Port of Prince Rupert. Because when you look at that particular route, it gives us access to all the Asian markets and gives us a preference of being able to get our product there over any country in the world. We've got 8 days or 10 days to South Korea and to Tokyo, and then going on to the east coast of India and all the other nations in between. And so being able to create new markets there with additional export of bitumen is going to be incredibly important. Some of the biggest refinery in the world of heavy oil is in India. There are 4 Korean refineries that have already received shipments of Trans Mountain heavy oil, and they like it, and they want more of it.
Smith would have Canadians believe that the world, other than the United States, is beating a path to Alberta's door, that Asian refiners can't get enough of Alberta's heavy crude oil. Not even close. Canadian heavy crude is a competitive but still marginal barrel in many Asian markets. High shipping costs are the biggest hurdle. Even so, in China, for example, Canadian heavy is a few dollars per barrel cheaper than competitors like Iraq's Basra heavy. But there are many other factors, like acid and metal concentrations, that determine which crude oil a refinery buys. The bottom line is that demand from Asian refineries and petrochemical complexes is expected to rise over the next 5 years, probably enough to completely fill the Trans Mountain expansion pipeline and the extra 200,000 to 300,000 barrels of capacity that can be added by optimizing its operation. Is that enough to justify building Northern Gateway? Look at it this way. OPEC thinks that Asian oil demand will skyrocket over the next 25 years, a view, frankly, that Smith shares. But the International Energy Agency forecasts global oil demand to peak in 2030 and begin to decline before 2035. That scenario would be a major risk factor for a new pipeline. Then there's the emissions intensity of Canadian heavy crude oil, significantly higher than any of its competitors. Any moves by Asian governments to strengthen climate policies or for markets to begin pricing emissions, as has been suggested in several of my recent interviews with industry economists, would add another big risk. Smith is already suggesting that Ottawa de-risk the project, which is not very subtle code for federal subsidies. Ottawa ponied up $34 billion to build the Trans Mountain expansion pipeline, which it now owns 100%. That bill should give taxpayers pause when considering their support for reviving Northern Gateway. And then there's a raft of federal climate and environmental regulation that Enbridge, Northern Gateway's proponent, is demanding be repealed or modified. Last but far from least, is First Nation and community opposition to the project. Protests were vociferous last time, and it's hard to imagine pushback against the pipeline would be lower than before. Smith seems to be serious about pushing Northern Gateway. Prime Minister Mark Carney's desire to get Canada building again and his recent support of public comments for a new pipeline suggests the Premier probably has reason to be optimistic. Regardless, a new pipeline should not be built unless the proponents can lay out a solid business case with minimal risk for Canadian taxpayers. Show your math, Premier Smith. If you can't or won't, then Canadians should refuse to support Northern Gateway or any other pipeline proposal.